Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott. Today, Craig and I are going to give you a look at something a little bit different, and that is this Sirui Saturn 35mm T2.9. This is an anamorphic lens with a 1.6 squeeze. I'm going to let Craig take it away as he gives you an intro to this unique lens.
This is the Sirui Saturn 35mm T2.9 anamorphic lens. Let's check it out today to start things off. So yes, this is a anamorphic 35mm full frame lens, and it comes in two different options. It comes in a neutral flare option where your flares are going to kind of just be that basic white light, or it comes in a blue flare option where your flares are going to be streaked in blue. Now, it has an aperture range of T2.9 to T16. All right, for your technical talk, let's head over to Dustin.
All right, thanks, Craig. So I'm going to give you a quick breakdown of some of the actual specs of the lens itself, some of the build and handling, and then just some general observations in using it. So our biggest advantage when it comes to this particular lens is the fact that it really is very compact and very lightweight. So at only 103 millimeters in length, or 4 inches, and its weight is only 415 grams, or about 0.9 pounds. That makes even using it on a drone an actual option. Obviously, you're gonna have to have a high-end drone to do that, but the very light weight and then size does open up some extra creative opportunities with this lens. Part of that is that they have used some real carbon fiber in the barrel destruction to help to keep the weight down. Now, obviously, with any kind of Cine lens, you're going to get some standardization when it comes to both the aperture ring and then the manual focus ring, both of which here on the barrel are set up for gearing. The weight on them, it's nice and smooth. The damping is what I would call on the reasonably heavy side, and that it does take a bit of force, but not so much you couldn't do it with a gearing or drive system. There's 120 degrees of focus rotation, and so to me, it's not in a bad spot. However, some of you might prefer a slightly longer focus throw. What I do like is the fact that you can do longer focus pulls without just a whole lot of rotation. Now, as noted, it is a T2.9, and so that corresponds roughly to an f2.8 aperture size measured by light transmission here. So obviously it's not incredibly bright, but bright enough for many shots, and of course that's another reason why the size and the weight is relatively small. The aperture iris has 10 aperture blades, and as noted, it does give you that cinematic kind of oval shape to the bokeh and the specular highlights. Now, this lens is available in actually a wide variety of different mounts. Now, we've tested in the E-mount version for Sony, but we've also got the typical mounts like Canon RF, we've got Fuji X mount, we've got Leica L mount, we've got Nikon Z or Z mount. There's also a unique DL mount for DJI mounts, which I've not actually tested anything on that, but if you do, it exists. There's also two different options when it comes to the flare signature for this. So we've tested the neutral. There's also the blue streak version, and I'll come back to that in just a moment. Now, the 35mm focal length, because of the constant 1.6 squeeze, actually gives a horizontal point of view of a 22mm lens. And so if we take a look at another 35mm lens, in this case, I set up a tripod, did the same shot with the Sony 35mm f1.4 G Master lens, and then I shot it with this lens. And so you can see that it is incredibly wider in the Sirui Saturn lens here, and so definitely a much wider angle of view. Now, general observations just in using the lens on the technical side, I did note that even after de-squeezing, there is some pronounced pincushion distortion that you're going to particularly see on the edges. Because this is such a wide squeeze, you don't see the distortion so much in the top and the bottom of the frame. You see it on the extreme wide ends. And so, for example, if you take a look at this shot just of my living room, I did not attempt to correct the actual distortion. I just de-squeezed it. And you can see if you look at the edges of the frame, there is an inward bulge. Now in the second shot, I not only did the 1.6 Desqueeze, but then I also did a correction in DaVinci Resolve of the pincushion distortion. You can see that the lines look nice and clean. Now, if you are not accustomed to doing that correction, just so you know, I dialed in a minus 0.08 to account for the pincushion distortion on the edges of the frame. It's probably better to do that after you desqueeze it, and so everything looks a little bit more natural when you do that. Now, coming back to those flare options for a moment. The blue streak flare is designed for a particular look. It is a very cinematic look. You'll see it in a lot of films, but the reason why I went for the neutral option here is that while there are certain situations where the blue tint looks a little bit cooler. For example, in this shot of headlight starting up, you can see that the natural flare isn't maybe quite as cinematic. But I do find that the neutral flare is a little bit more versatile in the different kind of shots you can do. Obviously, your mileage may vary, so if you're going to choose this lens, choose the option that best suits your cinematic style. Now, here is a sequence I actually shot when I was alone because I had COVID a couple of months ago. And so I shot this little kind of sequence, just kind of testing out the lens and playing with it. And so what I found as a part of testing the lens and then editing the footage is that the sharpness is good, but it's not exceptional. So if you're looking for the sharpest lens out there, I wouldn't say that this is the sharpest lens, but what I did find is that the lens had a very cinematic quality, just in the overall look of the footage, that my conventional non-cine lenses just aren't able to match. And so I think that the overall look of the lens is great, but it's not, top of the charts when it comes to sharpness. I also found that chromatic aberrations seem to be well controlled. And you can see from some of these shots that fringing is really minimal, and so that's certainly a plus. And I found that even when I was shooting with a window frame in the background, and it's kind of shocking to me how often I see in footage of serious shows or movies, when I see chromatic aberrations in the fringes around window frames, and I never quite understand why those are left uncorrected. That's not going to be an issue with this lens. It can handle those kind of shots nice and clean. Then the final thing that I want to comment on is that if you're looking to do any kind of close-up shot, this lens has a very poor minimum focus distance for what is a 22mm equivalent focal length. At 0.9 meters, that's 90 centimeters, you are a fair ways away from the camera to the subject, and obviously with a very wide angle of view, you're not going to be able to get close at all. So close-up shots are not part of the reality of this lens, so don't buy it with doing those kind of shots in mind. But my conclusion is that if you accept the limitations of the lens and use it around it, it really does provide some really great looking footage. It was a lens that I enjoyed playing with. Back to you, Craig.
Now this lens does offer a unique 1.6 times squeeze factor. And so depending on the video editing software that you use, there's different ways to go about using that, right? Because looking at it on your viewfinder, for example, on your LCD screen on your camera body, it's gonna look pretty messed up. So I would absolutely suggest, I would strongly suggest using a additional kind of attachment screen, a screen that's going to be able to, a field monitor that's going to be able to de-squeeze the image. Now, some of these shots here that you see, you can get away without having a field monitor on you, and that's what I did here for these landscape shots. And you can get away with it because you just close down the aperture, right? And you set the focus to about where it's going to be, and you can get away with it. Now you will notice some of these pieces of footage do have a softer focus to them because, I did kind of miss. I didn't have the field monitor on me. I definitely don't suggest going around with this lens without a field monitor and just, looking at the non-squeezed image on your LCD screen on your camera body and trying to find focus, because for example it's not really achievable. Even if you put focus peaking on, it's not going to work. For example, this footage of the statue here, right, peaking, I'm not using a field monitor, I'm just using the camera, that's it. Peking said that that statue was in focus when clearly it is not, all right? So you need a field monitor. You can't hack it. You can't go about in a cheap way and think you're going to find focus. And even with a field monitor, setting this shot up, for example, it is a little bit tricky. It is a little bit tricky, but what you can do, for example, this review is on the Sony E-mount. Sony camera bodies come with an option to zoom in to check focus. So go ahead, use that. You may have to hit, menu, go into the different settings, go into AF, MF menu, and then go into there and, blow it up, check your focus, make sure about it, all right? And, whenever you get focus appropriately made, this looks good. There is this trend going around on YouTube of how to make everything look cinematic, right? There's a bunch of color grading tutorials, how to make your footage look cinematic. Well, hey, if you want to make your footage look cinematic, get an anamorphic lens, right? All this space out here, that's pretty crazy. This is 35 millimeters. Let me see my arm spread out. You can see the whole entire back wall. This is cinematic, all right? It's cool. Now, the 1.6 times squeeze factor, how do you edit that? Because if you're going to bring that into your video editing platform and use it, it's gonna look really, really weird, all right? So I'm a DaVinci Resolve user. Here's what you do in DaVinci Resolve. You bring, first of all, your media into the media pool, and you can select all of the clips here that you want to de-squeeze, all right? So you're gonna right click on the clip, select clip attributes. You're gonna head down to this little subheader and you're gonna put in a custom ratio. DaVinci Resolve doesn't have a 1.6 times squeeze factor. It has 1.5, so it gets really close, but all you have to do is just go to custom, set it to 1.6, and all of your footage will now look appropriate. Now, of course, you don't necessarily have to stick to this kind of ratio, right? You can blow it up, you can do whatever you want, all right? The world is yours, so go ahead and do what you would like. It was a really pleasant experience in using this lens. Now, something I also want to know is that it does have a constant 1.6 times squeeze factor, so that as you pull your focus, the subject size doesn't change too much as you pull your focus. So this lens is, it's a cinematic lens. You get that nice wide cinematic anamorphic look. You get the oval bokeh, you get the light streaks going on from the light sources in the background. It's got all the features you would want for your next cinematic production. Plus, it is extremely short, just measuring in at 4 inches, very light carbon fiber construction. Really what this comes down to is it comes at a price point of, right now it's on sale for $1,100. So does this lens have the characteristics that you're looking for your next production? That is a decision only you can make. I certainly enjoyed using this lens, and if you purchase it, then I hope you do as well. That is it for today. I hope you take care. Purchasing links are down below. Take care, have a great day, and remember to let the light in.